The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in Riverside High's conference room as I stood before the school board, trying to keep my voice steady. The STEM program funding request I prepared had taken months of work, but Principal Matthews was barely glancing at it. My name is Dr. Jennifer Chen, though everyone at Riverside High just calls me Ms. Chen, the substitute. What they don't know is that I hold 3 degrees from MIT, including a Ph.D. in artificial intelligence and quantum computing, or that the simple coding club I run after school is actually testing breakthrough algorithms that could revolutionize machine learning. $500,000? Principal Matthews scoffed, finally looking up from his phone. For a substitute teacher's science club? Don't be ridiculous. I watched the school board members exchange knowing looks. They'd never taken me seriously, just another Asian woman they assumed couldn't handle a real teaching position. Never mind that I'd chosen to work as a substitute, specifically selecting long-term assignments at struggling schools like Riverside. The students have shown remarkable progress, I began. Their projects in robotics and AI programming. Ms. Chen, Board President Victoria Hawthorne cut in, her voice dripping with condescension. While your enthusiasm is charming, this is a public school, not a tech startup. Perhaps you should focus on basic substitute duties rather than pursuing these grandiose ideas. If they only knew that the basic substitute standing before them had just closed a $50 million deal with Google for her quantum computing patents, or that she owned the very land the school was built on through a complex series of trusts and holding companies. The truth was, I didn't need their funding. What I needed was to prove a point about overlooked potential, both mine and my students. Furthermore, Matthews continued, clearly enjoying his moment of authority. Your request for advanced computing equipment is denied. The football team needs new uniforms, and we all know what really matters in Texas high schools. I thought about Maria Rodriguez in my coding club, a sophomore who'd already developed an AI algorithm that could predict earthquake aftershocks with 90% accuracy. About James Wilson, whose machine learning project could revolutionize early cancer detection. About all my brilliant students dismissed as troubled kids because they came from the wrong side of town. I see, I said quietly. And my proposal for the summer STEM program? Ms. Chen, Matthews sighed dramatically. Let me be clear. You are a substitute teacher, a temporary employee, worthless in terms of long-term planning. Know your place and stick to following real teachers' lesson plans. Board Member Thompson nodded sagely. We've already allocated the summer funding to Principal Matthews' Leadership Academy. What they didn't mention was that the Leadership Academy was actually a basketball camp run by Matthews' brother, charging students hundreds of dollars in registration fees that mysteriously never appeared in the school's official accounts. I documented every questionable financial decision, every misallocation of funds, every instance of nepotism and corruption. The evidence was devastating, and tomorrow it would all come out. Very well, I said, gathering my proposal papers. Thank you for your time. Oh, and Ms. Chen, Matthews called as I reached the door. Don't bother reapplying for next semester. We'll be going in a different direction. I smiled slightly. I understand completely. Walking back to my classroom, I passed the school's trophy case. Inside was a faded photograph from 1960 showing my grandfather standing with the original school board. He donated the land for Riverside High, believing education was the greatest gift he could give to the community. Property is power, he'd always told me, but knowledge is the key to using it wisely. When he passed away last year, he left me more than just the land deed to Riverside High. He left me a mission to transform education from the inside out. That's why I'd gone undercover as a substitute, learning the school's real problems firsthand while quietly building something revolutionary. In my classroom, the coding club was waiting. 15 students, all brilliant, all overlooked by the traditional system. How'd it go, Ms. Chen? Maria asked, looking up from her laptop where complex code scrolled past. Exactly as expected, I replied, thinking of tomorrow's board meeting. Sometimes you have to let people underestimate you before you can show them the truth. James frowned. They're not going to shut us down, are they? No, I assured him, checking my phone. A confirmation email from Google about tomorrow's announcement. In fact, everything's about to change. After the students left, I stayed late, organizing the evidence I collected. The financial records showing systematic misuse of funds. The emails proving Matthews had been stealing from student programs to fund his pet projects. the documentation of how the board had repeatedly ignored discrimination complaints and suppressed student achievements that didn't fit their narrow view of success. My phone buzzed, a message from my lawyer confirming everything was ready for tomorrow. At exactly 10 a.m., when the board gathered for their monthly public meeting, they would learn exactly who owned Riverside High's land. And at 10:15, when Google announced their acquisition of my quantum computing patents, they'd learn exactly who they'd been calling worthless. But first, I had one more class to teach, one more day of being underestimated, one more day of watching brilliant minds bloom despite a system designed to suppress them. I touched the old photograph in the trophy case on my way out. "You were right, grandfather," I whispered. "Education is the greatest gift, but only if it's given equally to all." Tomorrow, Riverside High would learn that lesson the hard way, and its worthless substitute teacher would finally reveal her true value. The morning of the board meeting dawned bright and clear, Texas sunshine streaming through Riverside High's windows. I arrived early as usual, watching students file in, many wearing the robotics club t-shirts we designed together, unaware that today would change everything. Principal Matthews strutted past my classroom, not even bothering to look in. I could hear him on his phone, probably finalizing details for his brother's leadership academy that was really just another scheme to siphon money from student programs. At 9:45, I gathered my materials and headed to the auditorium where monthly board meetings were held. Parents were already filling the seats. I'd made sure the coding club students had spread the word that today's meeting would be interesting. "Ms. Chen," Maria called, hurrying up with her laptop. "I think I fixed that bug in the earthquake prediction algorithm." "Perfect timing," I smiled. "Why don't you sit up in the front row? I have a feeling the board might be interested in seeing it today." At precisely 10 a.m., Board President Hawthorne called the meeting to order. Principal Matthews sat at her right, scrolling through his phone with his usual look of board superiority. "First item," Hawthorne began, "approval of the new budget allocations." "Excuse me," I stood up from my seat. "Before we continue, there's something the board needs to see." Matthews didn't even look up. "Ms. Chen, public comments are at the end off." Actually, I cut in, walking to the podium. "As the owner of the land this school sits on, I believe I have the right to speak at any time." That got their attention. Matthew's phone clattered to the floor. "What did you say?" Hawthorne's voice had lost its condescending edge. "I pulled out the property deed and my grandfather's original contract with the school district. Riverside High sits on land owned by the Chen family trust. My grandfather donated its use under very specific conditions that this board has systematically violated." The audience began murmuring as I projected the documents onto the screen behind the board. Specifically, I continued, "The land grant requires that at least 60% of the school's discretionary budget be allocated to academic programs. Currently, that number is less than 30%, with most funds diverted to athletic programs and," I glanced at Matthews, "questionable leadership initiatives." Matthews started to speak, but I wasn't finished. "Furthermore, as a legally binding condition of the land use, all major budget decisions must be approved by a Chen family representative. That would be me, Dr. Jennifer Chen, MIT Ph.D., not just a substitute teacher as you so often remind everyone." The room erupted in chaos. Parents were standing, demanding explanations. Board members were frantically flipping through papers, realizing the truth of my claims. "This is ridiculous," Matthews sputtered. "You can't just." He was cut off by phones buzzing throughout the auditorium. Right on schedule, Google had announced their $50 million acquisition of my quantum computing patents. The headline included a photo of me in my MIT lab, long before I'd gone undercover at Riverside. And while we're discussing credentials, I added, "Let's talk about what my worthless coding club has achieved." I gestured to Maria, who connected her laptop to the projector. Her earthquake prediction algorithm filled the screen, along with validation data from the U.S. Geological Survey. Maria Rodriguez, who you've labeled a problem student, has developed an AI system that outperforms current government models by 40%. James Wilson, who you wanted to suspend for unauthorized computer use, has created a machine learning protocol for early cancer detection that 3 major hospitals are currently testing. The students beamed as their projects appeared on screen. Parents gasped as they realized what their children had accomplished despite the board's obstruction. But perhaps we should discuss the real problem. I continued, pulling up the financial records I'd gathered. Like the $300,000 from last year's technology budget that somehow ended up in an account controlled by Principal Matthews' brother. Matthews went pale. Hawthorne started to stand, but I held up my hand. Don't worry, the FBI has already been notified. They're particularly interested in the pattern of discriminatory funding decisions and systematic misappropriation of federal grants. The next hour was a blur of revelations. Every corrupt decision, every stolen dollar, every suppressed opportunity, all laid bare before the community they betrayed. By noon, Matthews had resigned, along with 3 board members. Federal investigators were already setting up in the conference room. But this wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about transformation. Moving forward, I announced to the shell-shocked audience, the Chen Family Trust will be establishing a $50 million endowment for Riverside High. Every penny of my Google patent sale will go to funding real educational opportunities, not just in STEM, but in arts, humanities, and every field where passion meets potential. The changes began immediately. The Coding Club became the foundation for a new technology academy, with Maria and James as student leaders. The Leadership Academy funds were redirected to create scholarships for underprivileged students. Every classroom was equipped with the latest educational technology. 1 month later, I stood in my classroom, my real classroom now, as the permanent head of Riverside's new Science and Technology department. The walls were covered with student projects, college acceptance letters, and news articles about our achievements. Dr. Chen. Maria poked her head in. She just won the state science fair with her earthquake algorithm. The new board members are here for the STEM program presentation. The new board was a revelation. Diverse, qualified educators who actually cared about students. They listened intently as my students demonstrated their projects, asking intelligent questions and offering genuine support. You know, James said after the presentation, I still can't believe you were secretly a famous scientist this whole time. I smiled, thinking of my grandfather's wisdom about knowledge and power. Not secretly, I was exactly who I am. The board just didn't bother to look past their own assumptions. 6 months after the revelation, Riverside High had become a model for educational transformation. Our test scores had skyrocketed, college acceptance rates doubled, and students who'd once been labeled troubled were winning national awards. The old trophy case now held different achievements: science fair medals, robotics competition trophies, academic decathlon awards. But I kept my grandfather's photo there, a reminder that sometimes the greatest power lies in being underestimated. Matthews occasionally appears in local news, complaining about activist teachers ruining traditional education. Meanwhile, 3 of our students have already been offered early admission to MIT, and Maria's earthquake prediction system is being implemented by geological surveys worldwide. The worthless substitute had transformed not just a school, but an entire community's understanding of educational potential. And every morning, when I pass my grandfather's photo, I smile at the truth he taught me. Real worth isn't in titles or authority. It's in what you build, what you teach, and most importantly, what you reveal when everyone else is too blind to see the potential right in front of them. As for my quantum computing research, I still work on it now with a team of brilliant high school students who prove every day that genius doesn't care about zip codes or social status. Together, we're building something even more valuable than a $50 million patent. We're building the future, one underestimated student at a time.